Hey everybody, and welcome to this webinar on live streaming graduations. And this is really important. We thank you for joining. This is what we do every day. We love to live stream graduations. I think it's some of the most fun that we have as a production team. But we don't have to be the ones who do it. And we wanted to put this webinar together to introduce the idea that not only is it something that we think is important for you to do, but that it doesn't need to be all that complicated. Now, obviously, the complicated part of it is complicated, and that's why we're here. We're also here to try to make things easier for schools that want us to do that. But we feel so strongly that everybody should be live streaming graduations that we wanted to offer a few tips and tricks to kind of get you started. So first, I'm here with Claudia.
Hello, guys.
And Claudia and I work very closely together. She's been involved with me on graduations for a long time now. And so this is a great opportunity to walk through what we think are some important things to consider when it comes to graduations. And so as we kick this off, let's talk about our agenda for the next little bit. First, we're going to talk about those advantages. And it's hard to say that there are cons anymore to this, but we'll talk about the challenges. I'm sure that there may be cons. You know, you'll think about maybe cost or something like that. But we'll talk about these things in the form of challenges. But they're not impossible to overcome because you can live stream from your iPhone. So it doesn't need to be something overly complicated. Second, we'll talk about some examples. Every image that you see going forward is something that we live streamed. And so we'll be showing examples that we have done. We got started with this before COVID. We started doing a lot of live work. And so when COVID hit, we were perfectly situated. We had already built a lot of tips and tricks for how to be super efficient. And we hit it out of the park that first year with over 40 events covered. We were live streaming at every level, from elementary through college, and it was amazing. And so we've got a few examples we can show. Then we'll talk about some additional considerations, and we'll move on to equipment. Things that everybody should know: cameras, audio, encoders, switches. Those are really the core components of a live stream. And then as well as some additional camera stuff and audio, we'll make sure that we focus on that a little bit. And then we'll close this out with some audience engagement things that we like to do, as well as some post-stream opportunities. What can you do with the material? And so, Claudia, what do you kind of think going in?
Yeah, well, we know everyone's circumstances are going to be different. Your graduation may be inside versus outside. Your budget may be big or small, or you have a big team to help or small team to help. So we're going to cover all of that, kind of give you the best guidance to handle your specific situation. You're welcome to reach out to us. We really encourage it because like Mark said, we enjoy this and we want to help you guys. So let us know.
So that's exactly right. As we dive into graduations, and so like I said, every image you see is something that we did. This was an 8th grade graduation. We had 4 cameras set up on this. There was not a whole lot of activity. The kids walked down the middle aisle, and they had a photo opportunity in the middle, so there was not a whole lot of nuance. But today we're going to explore the world of live streaming graduations. The way we look at this, there are a whole bunch of advantages, and the first advantage that you might think is sort of almost insulting to present, which is the idea that other people get to see it. But let's at least start there, which is the reason why we think it's so important is because families are not all living in the same place. You have people all over. When you graduated from school, Claudia, did your whole family make it to the graduation?
No, and we didn't even have live stream or video options at my school. So if you missed my graduation, you missed it. And I have a military family, so they're everywhere, different countries, different states. So it would have been really helpful back then if we did have that, but no, not for me.
If there was live streaming available, do you think some of them might have tuned in?
100%. I mean, my little brother is 8 years younger than me, and we can tune in live stream to his graduations now. So my family's definitely on board for that.
Yeah, so we think it's important. Grandma, grandpa, people in hospitals, people overseas, military families, we just think it's important. So increased accessibility, that's number one. Number two, which kind of goes hand in hand, it's related but unrelated, which is reduced venue capacity. The number of people who like to go to graduations is often more than the venue can handle. And especially when we get into those high school graduations or the large school graduations, where they'll say, we're going to offer families 2 tickets to a graduation. And so they already have to handle not only all the kids and all the faculty and things like that as part of the graduation, but now 2 people times 700 or 800 now puts you at 1,500 people. If you go to extended families, it's easy to get into the 3,000s, 4,000s, and much beyond that. So wouldn't it be nice, not only can you present that graduation to them, but you could rent out a banquet hall and we could live stream to the banquet hall. So everyone can still be together, but we can continue to allow for additional seating. And if you don't, at least they could watch from home so they don't feel left out and insulted. Families aren't forced to make a decision for who can and cannot watch and, see the graduation. So like I said, it's related, but it's really important in this world of there's limited seating, so you only have what you have. But then we'll get to the next advantage, which is you wanted a recording anyway. And live streaming a graduation not only lets you record the graduation, but if it's handled correctly, it's often better than a fully edited graduation, and certainly even if it's not just better, it's a lot faster. An edited graduation can then be presented often within minutes of the final graduation. The rewatch can happen instantaneously. The school can take that footage immediately. So recording and then obviously sharing that recording is something you wanted anyway. And the other thing related to that is it helps people put their phones down. That one of the things you want is less distraction, more engagement, and you want people to actually get to watch and see the expressions on the people's faces, their own kids' faces. They can't do that if they're staring at the back of the phone. It's so much harder. And so you're not only giving them a gift, and you're giving the people at home a gift, but you're also giving them the gift of the time back. And that's really special. So we think it's super valuable.
And anyway, too, a lot of the time, to that point, your shots will be, or when you record it with an actual video camera, not the parents having their phone up, the shots are a lot more intimate, closer to the face. So it's a better shot anyway.
It's a better shot. And it's an event. It's not just watching one tiny little sliver of it. So moving on to the challenges. One of the challenges has always been that that live streaming, or even video for that matter, was expensive. And this is a legit challenge. You can't say that there's no expense to it. But what you can say is that a lot of this expense can be offset very simply. There are many schools now, many programs that we work with that simply charge $5 or $10 as part of the student activities fee. And that money goes to giving those families back a video of the graduation. So it's a tangible byproduct of that fee, and it's often very easy to sell to the families and say, here's why we do charge this very small student activities fee. In addition, you have sponsors, you have community businesses that already are putting their banners up at the baseball fields and in the gymnasiums and things like that. They'd be thrilled to help to contribute toward the graduation. And their name, obviously, as part of the program may appear somewhere, but the bottom line is it's something super valuable to them. It's part of the community. It's easy to offset those costs. So we don't look at those challenges as much anymore. We're not bringing a massive infrastructure in order to record a bunch of cameras. We've been able to scale this down to something that is not only manageable in footprint, but also manageable in expense. So it is recoverable. It's not a massive thing. And then, of course, there's the fundraising part of it that happens where you can say we'd like anyone who watches to contribute either a donated thing or $1 or $2 for the watch. And it doesn't take a lot. We've seen graduations with thousands and thousands of people on the other end viewing, and if you charged $1 each, you'd more than cover the cost of the entire event. So it's a challenge for sure, but we want to at least look at this from it's not an insurmountable challenge. And if you were going to record a video anyway, and there was any expense associated with that, now it's 2 birds with 1 stone, really.
Mm-hmm.
In other areas, the cost for the live stream itself. And I alluded to this when we first started, which is, yes, bringing in broadcast cameras is not free. Bringing in people who know what they're doing and do this every single day and know how to add graphics and build the shows, the montages, the videos, all that in advance. Sure, there's some expense, but you don't need to get started there. You can get started with a simple iPhone. And not our favorite, but 100% doable. There are all kinds of ways in order to take a very, very small production and make it something that is really better than not only better than nothing, but way better than it ever used to be. So you don't need to start going big. So the cost of live streaming does not need to be really much at all. And then there are two other challenges. Challenge number one used to be more the technological limitations. The education of your audience used to have a hard time sometimes with watching live productions. And just time fixed that. A lot of people are now accustomed to watching YouTube, Vimeo, Twitch to an extent, Instagram, TikTok, and any other live link that they get. They're much more comfortable with that. And then lastly, internet. Yeah, this is to me the only legit challenge.
That's the real challenge.
This is the real one. A lot of venues are going to be, they're not going to have wired internet. We're certainly not dedicated wired internet. If they have wireless, you now have 1,000 additional signals that can get in the way of everything else. And so you've got some potential interference in those rooms. Companies like ours, we're able to manage internet a lot better. First, we know what we're doing. We've got a lot of practice in this and how we build our own networks, how we figure out how we're going to tie into the outside. We use a technology called cellular bonding, where if you're able to give us a Wi-Fi signal at all, we can take it. If you then can give us a plug, we'll take it. If you can give us, then we may use our phones as a wireless hotspot. We'll take that. And then on top of that, we have two preferred additional connections. And what cellular bonding does is it combines all of these things into one way better, more stable signal. And while it's not completely that simple, because nothing ever is in the IT world, I think that is essentially what's happening. And so we don't look at internet necessarily as a challenge that cannot typically be overcome. But I will say one way that we overcome it is if something were to go wrong, you have a finished video minutes after the event is over, and we can simply, because of technical difficulties, start that video 45 minutes later. And so that's another way to do it. It's also, our technologies often allow what they call, it's buffering, but it's buffering in a good way. What happens is if the internet were to fail, the recording continues and it waits for the internet to become better, and then it picks up the live stream delayed as soon as it can. And so people at home hopefully are not missing a whole lot of this. They're just having to suffer through some of the garbage that comes along with bad internet. But at least you're still delivering. And then of course once it's over, you have a finished video. You can air the whole thing without any delays or hiccups or anything. And so there are a lot of ways that we try to manage for internet issues, and I know you've watched me kind of stress through this through the years.
It is a big challenge. It is good if you can kind of tackle that question first when you're planning. Again, this will really differ, I feel like, between whether you're inside an auditorium or outside on a football field or whatever room you're in, cafeteria. So I would ask that question first, tackle that question first, because it'll save you a lot of stress in the end.
Right. And it's one of the things we work on in advance. A lot of planning, a lot of questions. You got to know what questions to ask so you know how to get the right answers before you show up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about some of the examples. We're going to come back to this image a little bit later for a different reason. But here's a graduation we did that had 4 cameras. And you'll notice we've got 2 angles of the speaker. And so that's very nice. Of course, different speakers at this exact moment, but it's very nice ability to have multiple angles. But the real reason why we needed 4 cameras was because in this school, the kids walk down each side of the field in parallel lines. And that's because of the number of kids. And so the names are being read from each side of the field in an alternating fashion. So we needed to switch, and those cameras are over 150 feet apart, and they all have to be routed back to a central location for us. And so there were some long runs on this one, and in addition to the cameras being far apart, meaning long cable runs. And then we had one camera in the middle for the speaker, and we had another camera way back that captured the entire graduation, the entire scene. And so we were able to cut those 4 cameras together. And then we had camera operators on both sides. And so as soon as the speakers would start, they'd rotate back in, or one of the cameras can look back at the audience. So from people at home's perspective, there might as well have been 8 or 10 cameras. We were looking at everything when we did the entire graduation with just 4.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another couple examples. The example on the right is a traditional model. We put a camera operator in the middle with a broadcast camera because there was a lot of activity in the middle. There was not only a lot of things to see where at times that camera needed to be aimed very quickly in different directions or taken even off the tripod and shoulder mounted, but the procession walked down the middle aisle. And so there were times where that entire camera position needed to be moved out of the way. And so we utilized a bunch of technologies to do that in order to make sure that camera became mobile. And so that was more of a traditional example. The example on the left, Claudia, we've got some robotic cameras there.
We do. And this will kind of dive into why, different cameras have different uses or different perks, I would say. Obviously, for the example on the right, we wouldn't really be able to use a robotic camera because they're much harder to, when they're on, to, pick up and move very fast. You can sort of damage the camera doing that. So that's when you make a conscious choice of, okay, do we need robotic? The robotic ones have such a good zoom on them. Mark can control them from one place. He can control all cameras. So say we're not allowed to be so far forward. We have to be so far back. And, maybe there's not a lot of room on the sides that we can have camera guys be on and up a little bit. So in this case, we need all the robotic cameras in the back, pulling in a tight zoom, having Mark be able to control them so that we're not overcrowding the space and ultimately being a distraction.
That's right. We don't want to be a distraction. It's why we wear dark clothes. We honestly want to capture the event without becoming part of the event. You'll notice a couple other things about that image on the left, one of which is that you see 2 screens all the way in the front. Those are fairly large screens. It was a very long room, and so having additional ways of viewing was important. But this meant that we had to do a couple of additional things on our end. We don't necessarily want to create a copy of our live stream for the people in the room. Our live stream has a lot more cuts. It can be distracting for people in the room also trying to focus. And so we use a couple of what they call mix engines, or essentially simultaneous live streams, where we actually decide what we want on those screens. So when a speaker was speaking from the middle, we kept one camera on them, while the people at home may have been looking at different camera angles or an audience shot or something like that. And so we'll often run multiple streams at one time, and we'll do it for a lot of different reasons. But here you're looking at the ability at our desire to feed something to those front screens. So when that speaker was not on, most of the time we put a logo on. We weren't always looking for something to be on that screen, only things that were important to that audience. So that is something to note. Also note that those cameras are very high up. And so these robotic cameras, they give us a lot of options for where we want to place them, how we want to control them, a lot of options.
And I will say, I know me and Mark are kind of more techie, maybe more techie than you watching this, but the reason too we need cameras up so high is because you have such a big audience. Well, it's going to be the students that create this kind of audience, and you don't want your camera guy in the back struggling to get a good view over all these heads. So just goes back to the point of knowing what questions to ask, trial and error, of course. If you could do a rehearsal day, that's always amazing. But
and you can't control a camera that high, so you would need a camera riser. You would need a piece of furniture that looks like a table that the camera operator can get on. So again, if we're able to utilize one tool versus another, sometimes we could make our life incredibly easy when it comes to that stuff. So moving on, I just want to show a little bit of fun. Here we ended up placing the graduation in a drive-in movie theater. Over 1,000 cars were able to participate. They all got together to watch the graduation. This movie theater allowed for all of the audio to be broadcast on an FM station, so everybody could tune in their cars to that station, and then they could bring in the audio. And it was a lot of fun. Something the students could never have imagined, that they'd be on a massive screen in front of 1,000 vehicles. So, put 4 people per vehicle, and that's a great audience for that graduation. And you'll see a couple other niceties, like the big billboard that everybody would pass on the outside driving over, and then you would see, the countdown screens, and then the slide shows. All of the things that made for a beautiful video were right there in front of all those wonderful people. So.
And again, this is just ways to get creative, increase the value, maybe be a way to make $1 back on the efforts put into it. Right.
So the next 3 are just additional opportunities. You see professional angles and features. The image on the left, the school had some wonderful, talented kids, and they wanted to be able to have them participate in the graduation. But by having multiple cameras and trained camera operators, we were able to make that look like a broadcast professional piece that these kids would get to keep and share, even apart from the graduation. It made their lives a little bit more special.
Yeah, because a lot of the time too, the musical guest or guest speaker, they can be so little in comparison to the audience, because some people are so far back, or a lot of the time, they have the musical guest down at the front, which is off stage, and, then you really can't see them. So this just offers a closer view, especially for the musical guest they probably work so hard, and it's a very special moment for them.
Yeah. The middle is intended to show another angle, something that the audience would never get to see. Because we have the ability to run with multiple cameras, we get the ability to put them wherever we want. And in this case, we set up a camera directly behind the podium, which would create a more artistic presentation when the person first joined. Something really cool. It was a camera we rarely used, but it was there, and we used it a little bit, and I think it added some nice touches. And then to the right, just to show, it's another feature of that is often done in video, which is credits. We can show all the faculty, we could show all the students, we could show the people that worked so hard to put this together, we could show the sponsors, any messages. We could put together any kind of graphic that we want to finish this and make it look and feel really special. A couple other quick examples. The image you see on the left is a wedding, not a graduation. We're a very different kind of a graduation gown, that's for sure. The reason for showing this is really the camera itself. This is a 360 VR 3D camera. And we use this camera so that people can be immersed in the experience. And it's not just for creating immersive video that's edited and finalized, but we can live stream from this camera. And you can look at it on your phone, even YouTube, for instance, is great at this, where you can then use your finger and look around, or you can put it on gyro mode, and then you can hold your camera and look around in different directions, and the image moves with you as if you were there. Or you can even put goggles on and watch this thing as if you were sitting in that seat, and you can look wherever you want and see all the guests and have a great time. So we're calling this slide out of the box thinking, because that's what it is. It's just saying, what could we accomplish? Would we like to accomplish it? What's the big ideas here that might make a difference? And we want to encourage big ideas and make it fun. We'll talk about a lot of things that you could do throughout the rest of this video or throughout the rest of this webinar, but we do think big ideas, come up with something that's special, and get it for them. It makes a lot of difference. The image to the right is something else we'll talk about shortly, which is pre-recorded video. In this case, we brought somebody into the studio and used a teleprompter and created a really nice branded look. there is no limit to what you can add when it comes to video, when it comes to live streaming. And not only that, this can be played in front of everybody during a live stream or during the commencement ceremony. If you have screens, you can put this on the screen. So think about this in terms of what can be added and whether people want to see it. And to that point, let's talk about some of the other things that are able to be done. And the first I wanted to show was the caps. It's very hard to see kids throw their caps up in the air. It's a very special moment. And as a matter of fact,
my school doesn't. My schools didn't allow us to throw our caps. They thought it would be too messy and too chaotic. So we actually were told we're not allowed to actually throw our caps in the air, which was sad.
It's sad.
Yeah, you see that in the movies and
but
stuff.
What if you could get it a different way?
Yes.
So here we go.
Cue up movie.
Cue up movie. So here's an example of a little thing we did. We just simply sent out a note. We got the videos back for all the kids, and we were able to put in a little cap throwing thing. So I'll be quiet here and give you a very short sample. And there you go. That's just something that can be very easily accomplished. And we would even get really creative. There were times where we would actually do some fun things throughout that cap throwing ceremony that made it extra fun. And and there's a lot of personality. Personality is one of the things we want to capture, and that was an opportunity to get some personality.
And graduation days go by so quick. You have your whole year, the long wait getting to it, and the day goes by so fast. So it's a good way to also prep. And students, parents are so stressed the day of. So to already have something pre-recorded, it just is going to give everybody the opportunity to actually just sit and enjoy the moment, watch it, and be like, oh, yeah, that was me.
That was me. And here's an example. Again, when we think about recording a performance, the best thing we could do if we're able to get a second camera or a third camera or something from behind, it adds so much production value. And for these kids, these are dream come true segments. And so here's an example of a little bit of the performance video that we did. And you can check that out. It's great, and it matters a lot. It really matters a lot. A couple other things. One of the problems we faced was in terms of slides. There are a lot of graphics, whether it's a lower third graphic, a title at the bottom, a name. And when you're dealing with schools that may have hundreds or even thousands of people, or even tens, it's really hard to build individualized graphics. But a lot of the time we feed our graphics in an automated fashion. And so here is an example where we are feeding those graphics. And we were able to very quickly create thousands of these. And we worked with the school to get pictures. And this was a pretty rudimentary example, but it just shows that we were able to populate 1,000 graduates here within minutes. Mm-hmm. We took a little time to work on the spreadsheet, but once it was done, it was easy.
But once you have your spreadsheet, you're pretty set to go.
And to that point, we also did the same thing when it comes to award shows or times where we're actually naming naming our participants. And so here's an example where we did this again via an automated fashion. We timed the names popping up when they were speaking to when they popped up on the screen. And so you can see that there are so many little things that can be done. This can be done live as long as you have the preparation time. And, you know, again, this used to take editors weeks or months to put together. And for us, it's become something that is routine. And we talked about pre-recorded video a little while ago. But while you can use pre-recorded video, you can also use live outside video. And we have had occasions where guests, faculty, folks that couldn't be present were able to be present and actually give a live speech. So we can take a recorded speech and put it on a big screen, but we could also take a live speech and they can interact with the crowd. They could see what's going on and comment in real time.
And depending how you do this too, it can be as easy as them just clicking a link to join a call, kind of like a Zoom. You know, they don't have to have this huge production set up on their end as well. They can be in an office or in a home space, backyard, just something easy for them. So it doesn't have to be a whole thing. That's
right. So sky's the limit. If you want somebody to be there, they can be there. And so just think big and say, oh my gosh, this professor is in the hospital, or, there's an alumni who wants to say a few words that matters to the programmer. Just think about what matters, what would make this so special, and go from there. So that was a little bit of an overview of some things that you could think about, all things that we've done. So this is sort of a summary slide that really just says, you can start small. You can start with an iPhone. You can go to a basic setup which may be something as simple as one camera. You can go into a more advanced production, and then you can do all of this while thinking about your budget, while thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, and then you have a foundation. Think about the audience size impact. We want to also think about things that you want to focus on, things that you may not have normally thought about, like how do you run wires so that everybody is super safe? HDMI cables are good for 25 feet, really at the most, reliably. SDI cables are capped out at 300 feet. You can go a little farther, but if you want a reliable production, we don't encourage it. Fiber, almost no limit. You're not going to be 10 miles apart. So fiber will always be a great solution, but these wires have to be tucked and safe and protected so no one trips on them. There are wireless options to think about. The problem with wireless is sometimes wireless acts like wireless. and so you just want to plan. If something were to go wrong, what are you going to do? And so we have a production coming up here shortly where Claudia and I were just talking about that. And, the goal is to put a wireless camera up front because that camera may move. It's a long cable run. And Claudia's first question was, well, what if it fails? And the answer is, if it fails, we have two other cameras perfectly positioned to pick that up and wait for that signal to come back. And that's an acceptable risk for that production. Other productions, that's not an acceptable risk. That may be a fundamental camera that needs to be there at all times, in which case we are going to think about running that fiber connection or something like that. So again, just think it's not, it doesn't need to be rocket science. You can call us, of course. It's not that big a deal. Streaming platforms. You have YouTube, you have Vimeo, you have Twitch, you have Instagram, you have TikTok, you have Brightcove, you have
Facebook.
Of course, Facebook. How could you forget Facebook? So many options. Pros and cons to these. YouTube tends to look like YouTube. So, it will be noticed, unlike other platforms that are much more branded, like Vimeo, for instance. YouTube has a lot of amazing options. You could do private, you could do unlisted, you could do public.
It also, will post to YouTube right when you're done. So if someone shows up late or connection issues, it'll be right there on YouTube right when it ends.
Right when it ends. One of the big cons with YouTube is they're very finicky when it comes to copyright issues. And so while the procession for the graduates is actually copywritten. It needs to be licensed. That license is often offered for free, and YouTube is fine with it. But not other copywritten content. Sometimes YouTube will say that writer, that publisher does not permit that piece to be done in an unlicensed way, and they might shut your live stream down. So when we hear that somebody wants to use YouTube, one of the things we ask about is, well, what's the content you're planning on using? And we've done, there was an occasion when we did a very famous person who was in the studio playing their own music. And we had contacted YouTube in advance and said, by the way, this is not only, we don't not only have permission, but the person who's giving us permission is on the show. YouTube still turned that off halfway through. So if you're using copywritten content, we might encourage you to move to Vimeo. Vimeo live streaming is extremely high quality. It's beautiful. It can be perfectly branded, but it has an expense. And so you have to be a Vimeo Pro member, which is about $800 a year. So it ain't nothing. And, so that's that. Facebook has been an incredible platform because of its interactivity. You tend to see greater interactivity on Facebook than you do on YouTube or Vimeo. It's just a much more comfortable thing. It, obviously it's out of vogue with some of the younger generation in particular. People have moved away from Facebook, although Facebook and Instagram are so closely tied together that there are commonalities there. Instagram's was not built for horizontal long form live, but there are capabilities there.
You can also do both. A lot of the time you'll see an actual live stream going, and then, a volunteer will have their phone set up next to maybe one of the more important cameras, which obviously you'll talk about with the crew or whoever's setting up those cameras. And usually you can I've had so many times a volunteer from the schools, prop up just a phone on a tripod so that it could also be showing live on Instagram or Facebook or any other one.
That's right. And a lot of our encoders permit streaming to multiple locations. And so streaming to Facebook and streaming to YouTube is not out of the question. It's a routine thing that can happen. And then, of course, there are outside services that do this as well, including Restream.com. So a lot of options there. But let's think about it. This is something that, you should agonize over a little bit. What is your system? Where is your audience? And to that point, there really are 3 different ways that we communicate how we're doing that live stream, regardless of platform. And that's either a share link, an embed, or a direct to channel. A share link is when you get the link that you share. And so when you set up the live stream, it'll say, here's a direct link to the event. It used to be more problematic. These days, it's not that problematic. That link tends to be a good link. If something were to happen, we can usually get that stream back up on that link. And again, our goal is for nothing to happen. But if something were to happen, we don't want to lose anything. But some links are for a single event. And if anything were to happen, that link is no longer valid, and we end up needing to switch the link. So if your system is to share the link with the families at home, and anything were to happen, you have to send a new email out with a brand new link, and that is a problem. So while many places, many companies, many schools, many clients, they like to use shared links because it's direct, when you don't have as close interaction with your audience, they're not always favored. What is favored more is embedded links. This is when you don't give people a link to the video or to the live stream, you give people a link to a web page. So typically a brand new web page would be created right on your site. That takes about 1 minute. The embed code is dropped in. That is the IT way of saying the video will play on that web page. So you go to that web page, and there's the video. Now, if anything were to happen to that link, whomever is responsible for that web page simply swaps in the new link, and everybody at home gets to continue watching almost as if nothing ever happened. Mm-hmm. So that's what it means to embed. Many of our most important live streams are done with embed codes. We simply work with them. We get it set up. no problem. And then lastly, direct to channel. We do have schools and other clients who simply say, well, we don't want to worry about embed codes. We don't want to worry about direct links. We want you to live stream. It's going to be on our channel. Just send people to the channel and let them watch. Great way to do it, especially if you're trying to show off other content. It has a little bit of complication. Sometimes the live is a little bit hidden. For instance, on YouTube, it might be under a different tab. And so there may be some customer service things to walk through people who don't find it on their own. But again, a very popular way to do this. So embed is our most popular. The second is the direct link, which we have clients who, who ask for. And then the third is some like to just send a link to the channel. And so with all of that in mind, we talk about managing risk. Everything we do is managing risk. Any camera can go down. Anything can happen. And we're always trying to focus on how are we going to veer if something were to happen. I was a boater. I carried 2 of everything. And we still do a lot of the same thing. We think all the time, what if this camera fails? What if that internet fails? How do we keep this show alive? And as a result, I don't think we've ever had we've always been able to overcome anything that's been thrown at us.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, know what to sacrifice and what not to sacrifice. Audio is probably not an area where you want to sacrifice things. Cameras, sure, maybe it's a little easier. You could get away with one and it still look really good quality, really nice production. But so just remember that when you're asking the questions, when you're planning, make good choices when it comes to what you have to sacrifice, I would say.
Yep. And plan so you don't have to. And then everybody will hopefully win and the stress level goes way down.
Yes.
So a couple of thoughts on cameras. There are differences between professional cameras and non-professional cameras. There are big differences between iPhones and the cameras we use. And I'll show you a quick example of that here in a moment. Focal length. This is another way of saying how far can you zoom in cleanly. The more you zoom in, the more shake, sometimes the more noise, depending on how noise-free your camera is. It's about the intimacy. And we like to use both some wide, called establishing shots, and some close for intimacy. You want to show your audience a lot of different things often, and smaller cameras, unprofessional cameras are simply not as good at that focal length. So just think accordingly. And to that point, movement, stabilization, you don't want to make your audience dizzy. You don't handhold if you can ever avoid it. It's not really professional, and it does have the impact of making it harder to watch.
And you're going to be exhausted. I mean, graduation's run 2 hours? An hour?
Yeah, maybe an hour.
Yeah. I mean, your camera guy is going to be in for a days of work.
Yeah. So dynamic range. We're going to talk about that here in a second. Internal recording. This is one of the ways we handle risk. The more cameras we have that record internally, the more we know. If everything fails, the entire internet goes down, the switches go down, all the power goes down, everything goes down, our cameras still have batteries, and they still have cards in them, and we are still recording. And so while we have never needed to go to the actual cards for a graduation, it is one of the ways that we make sure that people always have a final video at the end of this project. Cameras, if you're going to use SDI, the best thing to do, which is a form of a wire, a type of wire, the most popular professional wire, it's best to have a camera with an SDI connection. Otherwise, you're going from an HDMI to an SDI converter to an SDI cable. You're adding more points of failure.
And more things that need power.
So, and if you're using fiber, you want to make sure that you have a mechanism to transmit and receive those fiber connections, essentially turning them from a video signal into an optical signal, and then from an optical signal back into a video signal. So most cameras don't have fiber connections. There are a couple that do, and they're really cool cameras. But bottom line is that there is a difference. And so the longer the runs, the more important it is to figure out how to have a professional camera so you can handle that. That's distance. Going to the next one. We just talked about the wiring. Wireless can be great. It can be fickle, but it can be great. And we use wireless when we need to. and we typically always think about what happens if, for whatever reason, the wireless went down. How do we keep the show alive? And that takes not only more cameras, or at least one more camera, but it takes some skill on the part of the operator to make sure that that person knows how to get off the camera, how to get back onto the camera, how to maybe manage that wireless connection a little bit as well. External recording, another point of failure. The more places we record, the happier our clients are going to be when they know that they have a final product that looks amazing. So we always record not only in camera, not only live streamed, but also externally. And then switch and encode. These are the two things that is most necessary for a live stream. The switch is like a blender. You pour all the ingredients in, and then you pour something out. What you pour in are all your cameras, all of your audio, all of your graphics, all of your remote videos and your remote guests. All of this gets poured into the blender and then mixed up, and then the person responsible then picks which components are let out at any one time. I'm going to show this camera angle, and I'm going to add this graphic on the bottom. We're going to go to this photo montage here during this. We're going to bring in this remote guest, and we're going to let people see that. So that's called a switch. You'll also call it a video switch. If you're in Europe, you'll hear it called a vision switcher. It's that device that actually mixes it all up and deals with it. There are software switchers that includes vMix, OBS, TriCaster. There are a couple of others. And then there are some amazing hardware switchers that includes ATEM, Roland, Yamaha has one. Higher end goes Infinite through Grass Valley and Ross and on and on and on. How you handle this is something that should be thought through, and your operator should know what he or she is doing. But that rounds out the equipment almost, because here are the three types of cameras we use. The broadcast is on the left. Our camcorder, which is also called a run-and-gun camera, very easy to hold, is in the middle, and our robotic camera's on the right. The broadcast camera has extraordinary dynamic range. Again, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. It does not necessarily have the same zoom. Now, I will say these are all Canons. They all look the same. They're all color corrected exactly the same. We can mix and match. But each camera has its own advantages and disadvantages. The camcorder utilizes a very similar sensor as the broadcast camera. This is the highest end Canon camcorder. It still has audio inputs in, just like the Pro camera. It still has ND filters for handling bright light. It's basically like putting sunglasses on your camera. It has still an SDI connection out, so we can use really pro quality video. It still records internally. Everything is great. Here, we're sacrificing a couple of the pro features in exchange, including that incredible dynamic range, which again, we'll talk about in a second, in exchange for zoom. This one now can zoom as much as our robotic camera. This can zoom 400 millimeters. And there's a little trick to maintain that quality and zoom in even more, called an optical zoom on top of that, where you use part of the sensor. A very high quality camcorder. And then the robotic camera on the right, which it has really been bread and butter for us. We use it for a lot of productions. Mm-hmm. The trade is, it takes a small footprint. You don't need camera operators. This one does not record internally, but it can run extraordinarily far distances. You can put internet switches over 300 feet away and then mount these cameras another 300 feet beyond that. Incredible range. And we have a joystick that can control not only the pan, the tilt, the zoom, but also all of the color correction and everything we need. And we could do it from great distances away. Extremely high quality. So those are our camera packages. And notice iPhone is not one of them. But I will say we will add an iPhone in some circumstances. If they're close to where our wireless is, we can actually bring that iPhone in as an additional camera source and maybe get some behind the scenes action or something like that. So we're not so egotistical with our cameras that we won't use the right product for the job. And this image is, when I've referred to this a few times in terms of broadcast dynamic range. What the dynamic range means is it's the difference between black and white. and how many different shades of gray you have between those two. iPhones have very bad dynamic range. No matter what anyone says, they're not great. Consumer cameras, not great. As you get from 8-bit cameras to 10-bit to 12-bit to 14-bit, even 16-bit cameras, that bit is a data word that actually means more information, more shades. And so those more shades means that if you were to look at this image, you'll notice I have people wearing black on the stage. I have white curtains that are not blown out white. They don't look overly exposed. They're pretty good. And I also have a blue sky. Normally, if we want to show detail in the black, we're going to brighten the exposure up and the sky goes pure white. If we want to show detail in the sky, it's going to be the opposite. We're going to darken the image until the gowns end up becoming pure black. So normally in a consumer camera, you have to pick what looks right and trade in everything else. But one of the advantages to going with the better camera is more shades. And here, there's very, very little that's close to pure black, and there's nothing here that's close to pure white. And all of that detail was captured. And so I just want to throw that out there. Not that you need a broadcast camera, but only so that you sort of understand that there is a continuum. There is something that professionals pay for that that to a lot of us does matter, just makes for a more palatable image.
Because your lighting will sometimes mess with you, especially if you're outside. You may have your camera set up and checked at 8 in the morning, but, the actual ceremony's happening and the sun is shifting. So it's coming in people's faces and speakers' faces, blowing everything up way brighter. So to have control, easy control and quality control over that is going to be really useful.
Really useful. Audio, this is one of the most complicated things we deal with. The great thing about a camera is you see the picture. The tough thing about audio is it sneaks up on you. When audio problems happen, they can be very hard to notice if you weren't listening very carefully. They can also be very hard to troubleshoot. Just audio can really be the downfall. And for a lot of us, especially those of us who started in audio, it matters a lot. Bad audio gives people headaches, or it can sound really weird at home. So there really are two things that often happen during graduation ceremonies. One of which is we're handed a feed. There's already an audio engineer there who's set up the speakers and is providing those PAs, this public address system for the people who are there. They'll give us a plug of the audio. They'll give us a copy of what's going to the speakers. We take that, we plug it into our system, and now we have audio from all of the microphones. We don't have to run anything new, except that if everybody gets quiet, those microphones get turned off and the music's not there for a minute, everything vanishes. There's nothing left. And so a lot of the time when we receive house audio, that's what it's called, the house audio, meaning the audience's audio, we'll add a couple of additional microphones called ambient microphones. So we pick up the crowd. So when everything goes away, there's still the ability to hear something. And also, that house engineer is not miking the crowd. So there is no cheering. That everybody can hear that because they're there, but the people at home can't hear it. So if we have a microphone and they could hear the audience clap and they could hear the kids cheer, now you've rounded out the production. And so we'll always add a couple of those. And then we mix the audio with the video, and out comes a final product. The alternative is that we have to run the audio, and we'll add sometimes additional microphones to the house if they can't give us a feed, or sometimes on a couple of occasions we've had to do the house audio. That's very difficult to do both. Your head, your ears, they don't work in two directions at one time. And so if you're trying to mix for live stream and you're trying to mix a different mix for the house, that can be very confusing, and it can result in some additional confusion and that kind of thing. So that's an example where we might have to bring in another engineer to run both. Or on small budgets, they'll tell us, just do your best. And, who gets preferential treatment, the final video or the people who are there? Like it's a challenge. So we work very hard to overcome that challenge. We try to automate a lot of our audio at that point. We try to make it as trouble-free as possible, but that's the hard part. We prefer it if we're provided a cable and then we're simply able to add some ambience to it. So bottom line, plan, think, plan, implement. I'd actually go farther and say it's plan, think, plan, think, plan, think. You want to ask the right questions. The more you know up front, the happier everybody's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Know your line runs. Know how far you need to travel. It can get really confusing. It can change easy. So just ask that question along with internet, along with if they already have an audio person to help, those kind of questions first, because it's going to determine a lot how you plan after that.
Exactly. And now we get to a couple of the fun parts of this. Here are 10 things that you can add to this video as part of, well, any video or any live stream. Each one can add a lot of value. The first is we'll always add start screens and countdowns. We don't want the people at home to wonder whether or not you're actually streaming. So we'll start the stream early and we'll give them something to watch so they know where they are. They know how much time they have to run to the restroom or brew a pot of coffee or whatever.
Kind of how you saw at the beginning of this webinar.
Exactly. Social media interactions. Sometimes before or after a live stream, you'll see that people may comment. And while they could comment on the video separately, then that they could add messages, personalized. But if someone's chatting live, you're able to capture that as well. And so here's an example of, let's say, a thing that you receive. This can be branded for your school, and you can be bringing these kinds of little messages on. One important thing is you're always worried about the hater that's out there.
Or the troll.
The trolls. But you don't need to worry about them. You're able to moderate. Even on our automated system for social media, it gives us a list of every message that came in, every username, everything. And we can pick and say we want the next 8 messages to be this one, this one, this one, and this one. And anything we don't check never makes it. And then we can automate those messages or not.
And you can charge for those messages. I know my high school, I think, charged parents to do special shout outs. So just another way to get some money back to, keep increasing the quality.
That's right. Pre-recorded messages, that's kind of what you just said. And those can be burned into the actual graduation. You can say you have a whole segment of things that were submitted by families. And so is no harm in having as many components of this as you'd like. Pre-prepared slideshows. If they gave us pictures, we turn them into little musical pieces that can summarize the year and all of the highlights and that kind of stuff. And that can be added. Again, sometimes we'll put that in the beginning. So people people who are waiting for this to start may see a pre-prepared slideshow with a countdown. Mm-hmm. And we may play that again at the end just because it's fun. Videos, music, graphics, you saw throwing the caps up in the air, but we're able to go and get anything we want. We can go and take interviews of the faculty. They could be 10-minute little snippets. They can be, the video of the baseball team winning the state championship. They could be anything you can imagine, and we can assemble that so it's part of the event.
Mm-hmm. Recaps of the year. Yeah.
Yep. Family and sponsor contributions. During that credit roll, that's a great place to be able to have different slides pop up with messages that came from the families, sponsors to say, Wendy's on Rosecrans wants to thank all the students for an amazing year, and Starbucks for all the cappuccinos that were drank.
My high school's was Kona Ice, the snow cone truck that would come.
Thank you for keeping us in business. You can add all of that stuff, and the sponsors love it, and of course it helps to define what that year was. Remote speakers, we talked about that. Bring them in, whether they're live or pre-recorded. Add that to the content. Interviews and special content, same thing. Go and talk to the faculty. Put those clips together. Everything is fair game. Viewer participation, that's chatting perhaps. whatever, sky's the limit. We've run things like this where we had little mini fun raffles or trivia. There are so many tools that can be done to keep these games alive, and you can have people tune into what's that trivia game thing called? That
Does it start with a K?
it starts with a K.
Kahoot.
Kahoot.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can do a Kahoot. You can have randomizers, so you can be giving away little things. You can everything you can do that can make it fun, and of course, you're creating a lifelong memento at the same time. And then what can you do when this is all over? Of course, you can cut it up for social media. You can create little highlight reels that include this. You have this video you can repurpose. I do want to mention this extended reach, especially for private schools, especially for programs that recruit. This can become a recruiting tool. Not the whole video. You don't want to send the whole video out, but the fact that you're able to capture all of these things. You wanted that highlight reel anyway that showed the athletic performance of your teams. And so now you've done it, and you've got it not only to show off your athletic program, but to be proud of at the graduation. And so maybe you do it for the graduation, and then the athletic program benefits, or the academic recruiting program benefits, or something like that. Or maybe you're taking their content and helping to show it off. Whatever it is, it's content. And as they say, content is king, and you're getting some really magical stuff here. And so I'm so sorry that this has to come to an end. Reach out. Claudia's here. I'm here.
Mm-hmm. And you can request, if we said something in this video and you were like, I want to know more about that, or, maybe we didn't go into depth, request a webinar from it. We're happy to put a webinar together by request, to target maybe any specific questions, or to dive deeper into certain softwares that we know, and all of that. So reach out to us, ask. We're happy to do it.
Happy to do it. And so with that in mind, we want to thank you guys very much.
Thank you guys so much.
And please, everything Claudia just said, it's been a pleasure, and we're here to support you guys. So don't hesitate.
See you guys.